Whether or not these feature-length apologies were ultimately accepted by the masses remains up for debate, but there's still no questioning the fact that from second stabs at superhero ensemble epics to timeline-pulverizing sequels, each of these films had "I'm so sorry for that other thing" written all over them. Gareth here from WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 movies that were blatant apologies. Number 10. Bumblebee. The Transformers series was in a rather odd place in 2018. A year earlier, the latest chunk of mindless blockbuster action by the name of The Last Knight had been pumped into existence to the sound of generally weak reviews. Yet the fifth Michael Bay Transformers entry still managed to bring home a staggering $605 million at the box office. That's a lot of chimichanga. Even with that financial success though, many had grown tired of the bombastic and often senseless action-obsessed outings that relied more on painfully unfunny humour and pleasing randy teenage lads than delivering a heartwarming tale for youngsters. You know, like the OG franchise was initially designed to do. That all thankfully changed with the creation of spin-off prequel Bumblebee, a film lovingly crafted by Travis Knight that centres around Haley Steinfeld's Charlie Watson as she stumbles upon the titular bright yellow Autobot in the late 80s, infusing some joyfully vibrant action with the sort of heart that has largely gone missing in the prior 5 soulless creations. Bumblebee very much felt like Paramount Pictures' way of offering a robotic olive branch to those who had been longing to see the true spirit of the Transformers realised on the big screen, and it's little surprise it sits as the highest rated film of the series so far. Number 9. The Suicide Squad. It's safe to say that Warner Brothers utterly dropped the ball when it came to the first outing for the DCEU's collection of anti-heroes in 2016. Instead of sticking with David Ayer's original version for the tale centered around the likes of Harley Quinn, the Joker, and other Task Force X personalities, the studio ultimately muddled together their own idea of what the film needed to be, leading to disastrous results. Fast forward a few years on, and in an attempt to reignite a concept that definitely held the potential to be DC's big screen version of Marvel's adored Guardians of the Galaxy unit, none other than Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn was handed the Task Force X team, and allowed to fully realize his own vision of an R-rated iteration of the ragtag bunch of badasses. In the end, Gunn's The Suicide Squad sequel/reboot of sorts all but ignored the prior lackluster entry, providing a violent and equally charming ensemble thrill ride that both acted as a promising sign for the DCEU future to come and apology for what it had disappointingly become in the lead-up. And with Gunn now leading the charge as co-CEO of DC Studios in the coming years, the future looks rather bright for this particular cinematic universe going forward. It's about damn time. Number 8. Star Wars Episode 7: The Force Awakens. While time has actually been rather kind to George Lucas's prequel trilogy, with episodes 1 to 3 becoming more and more audibly appreciated by the generation they were designed for in recent times, coming into Disney's Star Wars sequel trilogy, it was clear all involved wanted to distance themselves from the critically battered last collection of Skywalker's saga properties, with one of the biggest criticisms of the likes of The Phantom Menace and co. being Lucas's over-reliance on all things CGI. J.J. Abrams and Lucasfilm really pushed the fact The Force Awakens would see the return of more practical effects, just like those original trilogy flicks you love, guys. Elsewhere, gone was just about any talk of politics, and Abrams even went on record to note how he was considering dumping Jar Jar Binks' skeleton into the middle of a desert in Episode 7 as a way to again cozy up to those who weren't the biggest fans of the bumbling Gungan in the prequels. In the end though, The Force Awakens was regularly bashed for feeling like an uninspired remake of A New Hope, and it was evident that Disney were far more concerned with trying to replicate the original trilogy magic they felt their audience were angling for, rather than attempting to take the franchise in a genuinely fresh new direction like the prequels did all those years ago. Number 7. Rocky Balboa. As the cinema legend himself once put it, ain't nothing over till it's over. And on the back of the hugely underwhelming last hurrah for the Italian stallion that was Rocky V, it was clear Balboa supporters the world over were hoping that would most definitely be the case with the immortal big screen boxer, with Sylvester Stallone himself also expressing deep regret for the all-round mistake that was his hopeless apparent final outing as the ultimate underdog. Sly ultimately felt he was obligated to try and end the series the way it should have ended, but MGM again would take some convincing before committing to a 6th Rocky tale in the wake of such a dud of a previous outing. After nearly a decade though, Stallone was finally given the green light to give his beloved fighter the proper in-ring send-off Balboa fans had been wanting to see since that 1990s street fighting disaster. All in all, the return to form that was 2007's Rocky Balboa more than made up for the misstep that was 5 in the end, and helped set the stage for a triumphant next few rounds in the series in the form of the equally epic Creed showings. Number 6. Some Kind of Wonderful. While it has long been said that John Hughes actually went out of his way to forge the Some Kind of Wonderful script as a frustrated direct response to the way his previous Howard Deutsch collaboration's ending had been altered late in the day, the latter figure would eventually somewhat debunk this Hollywood legend when talking to Screen Rant about the project. But even with Deutsch revealing that Hughes had actually penned this script before the former had finished work on Pretty in Pink, the director notably added during that conversation that it is true that the ending of Some Kind of Wonderful is more in the spirit with what the original ending of Pretty in Pink was, where true love endures. The gender reverse tale being written before Pretty in Pink arrived on the scene though, still doesn't erase the idea of Hughes likely feeling Some Kind of Wonderful finally delivered the best friends live happily ever after conclusion he'd been looking to execute on the big screen in Ducky and Andy's original romantic ending pre-test audience-induced change-up. So regardless of whether it was a direct or intentional response to Ducky not getting the girl or not, it still definitely felt like Hughes finally got the chance to make up for an ending he wasn't fully all in on one film earlier. Number 5. Black Widow. Marvel Studios finally opted to unleash a long-desired Black Widow standalone feature on its audience in 2021, a decade or so on from her big screen debut alongside Tony Stark and co. Had the adventure depicting Scarlett Johansson's master assassin joining forces with her complicated family been unleashed even a few years earlier, around the time it actually fits into the MCU timeline, there's a solid chance the adventure could have made a decent impact, and helped add even more weight to the character's eventual death in Avengers Endgame. By the time Natasha Romanoff was finally given a bit more attention, and moments to be fleshed out as a three-dimensional being, however, fans had already witnessed the character fend off aliens on numerous occasions, and emotionally help snap half of life back into existence. So the just fine detour that Black Widow takes during the prequel wound up disappointingly feeling like little more than a throwaway apology of a side quest to revisit in the end, rather than the much-deserved chance to further enhance an already cherished figure it could have been had it actually been released after Civil War. Number 4. X-Men Days of Future Past. 2014's Days of Future Past pretty much saw 20th Century Fox hold its hands up and admit that The Last Stand was something of a misstep for all involved. And while the Bryan Singer-directed feature didn't go as far as to verbally bury/apologize for the flop that was the original trilogy of X-Flick's final feature, as Apocalypse, also directed by Singer, would one film later, the fact that time-traveling Caper ultimately resulted in the events of that 2006 entry being erased from the new timeline spoke volumes about how the studio and director viewed the limp stand. With Wolverine and the gang managing to go back in time and stop Bolivar Trask from creating the Sentinels program that will target the mutant race in the future, his success in doing so ultimately leads to the many notable X-Men who were frustratingly cut down during The Last Stand suddenly being alive again in the new modern day Logan wakes back up in. In other words, Fox managed to effectively pull off an ending that managed to both make up for controversially murdering the likes of Jean Grey, Cyclops and Professor X in that prior threequel, and simultaneously allow the prequels to forge their own story without the need to stick to the events of the original film's timeline. Masterful. Number 3. Deadpool. Ryan Reynolds' second swing of the swords as the Merc with a Mouth in 2016 finally let loose a version of the character both the actor and Deadpool diehards all over the planet had been hoping to see 7 years earlier. What eventually wisecracked onto the X scene during Origins Wolverine, however, was about as far from the Wade Wilson on the page as fans felt he could possibly get, and it came as little surprise when the 2009 Wolverine solo flick eventually came under serious fire for its usage of the quick-witted fourth wall breaker. But in finally releasing a depiction of the character Reynolds and Wilson's passionate fanbase could be truly proud of later down the road wasn't enough of a Fox apology to the fans for the fumbling of Deadpool a few years earlier, the sequel's time-traveling end credit sequence likely did the trick. And as it goes, Wade's headshotting of his former Weapon 11 self also came equipped with a now epic piece of foreshadowing for Hugh Jackman's eventual return as Wolverine in Deadpool 3 too. What a world, eh? Number 2. Terminator Dark Fate. Terminator Dark Fate very much felt like a film designed with the intention of trying to make up for the fact that the prior couple of showings hadn't exactly delivered the goods. But far from trying to delicately find a way to lace the events of the likes of Rise of the Machines, Salvation, or Genesis into the story being told in the 2019 return to rated R Terminator tales, James Cameron and his team simply opted to outright ignore everything that happened in those lackluster sequels. Sharing the sentiments no doubt felt by all those who had taken in those other forgettable Terminator failures, Cameron would even go as far as to state that the folks behind Dark Fate pretty much treated those post-Judgment Day projects as a bad dream or alternate timeline. Simply put, director Tim Miller and Cameron seemed hell-bent on finally delivering the fitting follow-up to the first two much-loved Terminator classics they knew fans had been desperately begging for since 1991. And Dark Fate was their, and likely Paramount's, way of apologizing for the many limp detours they were forced to drive down before arriving at this satisfying destination. Number 1. Zack Snyder's Justice League. What could have been one of the most special cinematic experiences of modern times quickly left fans wondering what could have been by the time Warner Bros. DCEU Justice League eventually crash-landed into theaters in 2017. With Zack Snyder being forced to step away from the project in post-production, Joss Whedon soon took over director duties and oversaw the studio's dreadful attempt at making a brighter and lighter version of the flick in reshoots. And the end results were enough to nearly kill the entire concept of a DCEU going forward. In the wake of this disappointing end product, however, rumblings of a supposed Snyder Cut began to make their presence known online, with various cast and crew members all embracing the movement too. And with Snyder himself eventually acknowledging the Release the Snyder Cut hashtag, momentum began to gather to the point where the director claimed that it was up to the studio whether they wanted to give the people what they wanted or not. By May 2020, they had their answer, as Snyder confirmed his finished Justice League would finally be released in 2021, with fans finally given the singular vision of the DC super team-up they'd been longing for since 2017. All 242 minutes of it. And that's our list. Of any other movies that were blatant apologies? Let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and do not forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're at it. Also, if you like this kind of thing, then head on over to whatculture.com and find some more incredible articles just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on. I have been Gareth from whatculture.com. Thank you as always for clicking on this lovely video today. Hopefully I'll see your faces very, very soon, but in the meantime, hey, just be good to yourself. Bye bye.